would you say to people that, because you mentioned just red light, green light. Some people are like, dude, John, why? I have an NMS
I
and
know.
I can do SNMP stuff, and it's
Yes.
kind of the same as what you're talking about. I can do an SNMP query, I can get some number back, and I can set thresholds and do alarming. I can do red light, green light on interfaces and a bunch of things.
Right.
Why would I go to all this trouble?
I face the same questions, and here's my personal opinion of it. I'm looking at it with today's tools like a third party, right? I'm taking Cisco Prime Infrastructure or SolarWinds or tool X, appliance X, and I'm monitoring the state externally. Like I'm not in the flow. I'm looking at it from the third party's perspective. So yes, that third party can ping and get SNMP polling every 5 minutes and get traps and get syslogs. That's about the limitation of what you can do unless you're, handcrafting something, which gives you a certain level of confidence. I would agree. I'm not dismissing that or saying that this is going to displace it. But what I like is that you're shelling into the router. Like I'm shelling into the router and doing a show command from the perspective of the router. Can the router do a ping to 2222? Can the SVI in my secure zone do a ping to 2222? Bad news, right? That's a failed test if it can. I'm in that persona of the SVI or the routing table, and I can test from that perspective. Now, there's other advances. So I thought, well, what if I stick a bunch of Raspberry Pis out there? The network engineer in me takes over, right? Can't I chick a bunch of probes out there? And what if I could log into my probe and test from its perspective, right? So now it's not even synthetics. It's truly logging into a Linux kernel that sits in a subnet on your network. And you can say, okay, I know that this subnet needs to reach some critical app front end. Okay, so I write a PIATS test that does a curl and evaluates whether or not I get a 200 back or a 404 back, right? From the client in the subnet in real time with real pass-fail reporting. No more waiting for users to tell you the internet's down. I know the internet's down. My test started failing 3 minutes ago, right? I'm ahead of that wave of calls now. At least I bought myself maybe 3 minutes before someone notices that the internet's down from that op zone, right? So do you see the subtle, it's a subtle difference there, but do you see the advantage over, say, these traditional NMSs, right?
Well, I mean, I don't even think it's subtle. I think it's a very big deal. The early days we had various tests you could run on a Cisco device. I'm totally spacing out on the name of the functions now, but you could determine is this route accessible, and then
Right. Well, they have the IPSLA, right? I think
that's what I'm thinking.
IPSLA is probably as close to this as we've got.
And
right?
they were limited, and it varied from iOS to iOS what you could do with them and so on. And they were not systematic. They were just kind of from a device and not replicable everywhere. And it was a nice tool, for some specific use cases. But
right.
what we're really saying here is when you're talking about automated state validation, you're taking a step back, looking at the network as a whole and designing a system that can be extended infinitely, really, if you're willing to take the time and put the logic in to demonstrate that your network, however complex it might be, is doing exactly what it needs to be doing at any given point in time, and having that be once you've got it built, a fairly hands-off thing. That's different from what an NMS does, for sure, which again, as I think you stressed a really important point. That NMS is looking at things from the NMS's perspective. It sits here in the management network or whatever we built on the network, and it goes out and it reaches out and polls, and maybe you've got out of band and maybe you don't, and and so on. But it's this point in time thing. If you can find the SNMP OID that you even want to query, good luck. Then you got to know how to interpret that data and so on. And so it tells you things. It's far from useless.
Right.
And it's useful. There's value there.
But I'm still going to rely on my MRTG graphing.
Sure.
As an example of an SNMP old school tool that I'm not throwing that out. I'm not saying these tools are going to be maybe displaced or not. But what I think is neat is we have an evolving ecosystem.